Now we have seen how to create a table from a select query, which is going to copy the structure and the data pieces that you get out of the select query from an existing table. The next step is we want to see how we can create a table without an existing table to copy from. For that, we need to first know the data types that we can use in SQL. So the data types for MySQL specifically are what you see in this figure, and you will not have to use all of those. You just need to know what you need. The most popular ones are varchar, integer, double, and date. Some people use enum, and I will cover some of them in a moment. But you need to know the data types, and you need to know how big can that data type be, or how big of a database can happen or can be held into that data type. Now for char and varchar, they hold strings from 0 characters to 255 characters. So when you see 0 to 255, that means minimum is 0, maximum is 255. You will have to specify the length though for those. Tiny text again, 0 to 255. Again, the most popular one is varchar. You can use whatever you want out of these. As you can see, text is a little bit larger. It can hold up to 65,535 characters. And then medium text is even a larger number. It is 16 million something. Long text and long blob, tiny. I mean, long text and long blob are all of the strings. Now, the next one is integer. So you have tiny integer, small integer, medium integer, and then you have integer and you have big integer. So all of these are for integers. Again, the most popular one is int, so you can use whatever you want out of these. You can use tiny or small if you are conservative about the memory, but with the current computers, this should not be a big issue except if you are planning on a fairly large database. Now, float, double, and decimal are for doubles, but the difference between the first two and the last one, float and double, are going to be stored as numbers, but decimal is going to be stored as a string, but it's going to be a decimal number. Again, the most popular one is double again. The advantage of this storing it as double compared to decimal is being able to do some mathematical operations on it. Then we have date, date time, timestamp, and time. Those are all for date and time. Now date is going to hold the date in the following format: 4 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, and 2 digits for the day, as we have seen when we looked up some dates in our select queries. You have date time, which is going to save the date and time. Again, the same format for the date, but then you have 2 digits for the hour, 2 digits for the minute, and 2 digits for the seconds. Timestamp is close to date time, but there is no separation between the year, month, day, and then hour, minutes, and seconds. There's no separation. And the time is 2 digits for the hour, 2 digits for the minutes, and 2 digits for the seconds. Now the enum is going to allow you to choose one of preset options. What do I mean by this? So for example, if I'm storing tasks and then I have priorities for the tasks, the priority categories I have is high, medium, and low. If I define my dataset as enum and define the possibilities as high, medium, and low, then the database will not accept anything except those three values. And you can predefine the values that you want to accept in your database. And Boolean is, if you're with programming, like familiar with programming, Boolean is true and false, but this is not a popular one in the database. Now let's look at varchar or tiny text, how we can create those. Now this is going to have an integer example as well. When I say create table articles, this is creating a table called articles, and then I have an integer, which is the ID, and I said the auto increment and primary key. We'll talk about that. And then I have title varchar 255. That means my title is going to be of type varchar, and I'm allowing up to 255 characters. Now it depends on the setup that you have. Sometimes if you go over the allowable number of characters, in some setups it's going to just reject the data. Some of them will give you an error, and some of them will just chop off the rest. And then for summary, it's tiny text, and this is how you define tiny text data type. Now for text, I'm using it in an alter table, but then this is what you need to know. This is the column name, body, and then this is the data type, text. Now what does not null mean? Not null means I'm not allowing you to give me a null value for this column. So this means this column is required because I'm not allowing null values. Now enum is interesting, which is what we talked about. Now if you look at this table, priority is enum, and I'm allowing low, medium, and high, and I'm not allowing null. So this means whenever you want to enter some record into my database, for the priority, you have to specify either low or medium or high. You cannot give me any other variable. You cannot leave this blank. So I'm not accepting any other value other than these three, and I'm not accepting leaving it blank as well. This is how you define a date. So you just say birth date, for example, is date. Again, the not null is not necessary in this case, but I'm putting not null to allow only records with birth date in this case. If you don't give me a birth date, I'm not going to accept that record. Date, time, and timestamp. So if you look here, I'm defining this column TS as timestamp and DT as datetime. Now, I know the column names are not the best, but this is just for demonstration purposes. And then the last thing I wanted to cover is the auto increment. Now, what is the auto increment? In many cases, you will use an integer as the ID, and that integer is going to be just the number of items, and you can use that as your ID. So, for example, if I'm talking about IDs of students, the first student is going to be ID, let's say 0001. The second student is going to be 0002, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. Eventually I'll reach something like 1001. The next one is going to be 1002. So I don't want my users to keep track of those IDs and go insert some kind of ID. What I will do is I will just use auto increment for that table, and then I will not even insert a value in that. I will just use our auto increment for that integer, and then every time I insert a record, it's going to check what was the last number, and it's going to add 1 to that last number, and that's going to be it. Now, knowing this about the data types and auto increment, and kind of knowing the primary key at this point, let's try to create a simple table. So I want to create a student table that has IDs, and I want the IDs to be incremented automatically. I want the name, for simplicity, let's just have it full name, although it's not the best design. And then I want to keep track of the GPA. Now, for the ID, I need it to be integers. So what I will do is create table. This is the first step. And then I'm going to call my table student. Again, all of your columns have to be in parentheses. And you have to specify the columns, and you have to specify the data types in here. So my first column is going to be student ID. And this is an integer. And I need to have it incremented automatically, so I'll say auto increment. And then I need it to be the key, so I just have it in uppercase letters. You don't have to have it in uppercase letters, but it's I usually put my constraints like this to be easier to read. And then let me make a primary key. So primary key. Now if you see the color change, you know that this is a keyword. What's next? I needed a full name, so I'll say, okay, I need a full name for the student. The full name is going to be a string, so it's going to be varchar. And I will just put 255 in here. And finally for GPA. So for the GPA, I need it to be holding some decimal, so I will either have it as float, decimal, or double. Again, we talked about the advantage of double over the decimal because it's going to allow you to do some calculation, so I will just have it as double. Again, we will start by the column name, GPA, and then this is double. Now you can go here and say this is not null. I want you to give me a name for every student. If you don't give me a name, I will not insert the record. Why I'm not saying not null for primary key? Because by default, if you declare something as the primary key, it is going to be not null. Now what I will do here is I will just have a semicolon to allow me to write another query, and I will say describe student. This is not necessary, but this is a step that I like to do to see what happened when I created the table right away. So I can just click this. Now see, I have my table, although it's not appearing here, but I just need to refresh. So this is student now. And if you look, student ID is an integer and it's going to give you 11, so you don't have to care about this. You don't even have to specify it. See, it is not null. I did not specify it's not null, but by being a primary key, automatically it's not null. And then in the key field, it says it's a primary key. Do we have extra things? Yes. We have auto increment in here. And then full name is varchar 255, and I'm not accepting null. GPA is a double, and I'm allowing nulls in that field. And this is roughly how you create a table. Now this is not the best table, but this is the way to create a table in the database. This is the other way actually, because we have seen the copying an existing table, and this is now how to create a table with specifying your own columns, your own constraints. Now again, this is not the best example of a table. So first name, for example, is going to be, full name is going to be first name and last name, and then we'll have some more things in here, but this is just for demonstration purposes.